What's going on, guys? Today I wanted to give you a review of the break-in period that I've had on the brand new 2024 CBR650R with the E-Clutch. I wanted to kind of hit on a couple topics so that way people kind of know what it's like. I know that they're still starting to come out within the States, so I wanted to go ahead and give you guys a honest review. So first things first, I will say the bike is very comfortable. I can't express this enough. I've ridden other sport bikes. I've ridden this thing for about 2 hours straight over the past weekend. I had zero issues with my back. And I have back problems, so I gotta admit, I did not hurt nearly as bad as I thought I was gonna be. Out of ergonomics, I will say that the handlebars, or rather the grips, I would recommend trying to get different grips. They are very hard, and of course with sport bikes, you're leaning more on your palms. Uh, I don't have an actual picture of the riding position, but I will say that you lean a lot on your palms. I did have some issues with my hands going a little numb. Only in like my fingertips though, it wasn't like crazy, but I did notice that in my left hand I was leaning more on that. So it after a while I did start to feel it in my palm. So I would recommend probably upgrading to different grips, but otherwise the riding position, leaning forward, it's not nearly as bad as you would think. Now the windscreen, it could be better. I've heard people say, like a double bubble with that lip at the top. I've noticed right around 70 miles per hour that you really start to get that buffeting in your helmet where it starts to vibrate really bad. In the position that you are, I will say, if you're full tuck or leaning back, it might not happen as much. But in your typical riding position, lean forward, not really down to the tank, you might start to have some problems. I am 5'9", so that might cause different issues. If you're taller or shorter, you might not have a problem, or you might have more of a problem. Kind of hard to say. Not really crazy. I did notice it just around 70 miles an hour or more. Now with the fuel mileage, I did seem to be getting around 50 miles per gallon, which is not bad for a sport bike. I did travel about 300 miles, and within those 300 miles, I was averaging like 50, 51. So it was a little bit off from my initial guesstimate of about 60, but still really good. I did put ethanol free in there, so a little bit more expensive is around 389 for me right now. But 389 for 50 miles, that's really not that bad. Now continuing on with the comfortability, it does tend to vibrate a little bit. Cruising at like 6,000 RPMs or 5,000 RPMs, you will start to feel some vibrations within your feet. I do ride with Vans, so I mean, you may not feel it as much as I did, but I did feel it in the pegs themselves. It wasn't crazy, but you might feel a little bit. Now for the E-Clutch, which I know a lot of people really want to hear about. The E-Clutch was amazing. I cannot express enough how much I actually enjoy it, where the only time I find myself pulling the clutch in now is around stoplights. Only because coming to that stop with the E-Clutch engaged, it tends to be a little jumpy coming to a stop. Kind of it wants to know if it wants to move or stop. It doesn't really know. So I tend to pull the clutch in still at red lights or stop signs, but that's just me. Coming from a stop, like if I started it and was going, it doesn't seem to have a problem. If I start it, drop it into first, no issues. So that is all, again, personal preference. Me personally, I just like to pull in the clutch, but otherwise, I don't find myself pulling the clutch in at all. It's like amazing. Now with the clutch again, it is only you don't have to use it. Now again with the clutch, it's not really mandatory to use. You could ride the bike entirely pretty much without the clutch with very minimal use. But I personally, I just like to do that. It does have its moments. I've noticed when I started the bike that if you try to drop it into gear relatively early, like soon after starting the bike, within like 10 seconds, like say you're already sitting on the bike, you start it up and you want to drop it in gear, sometimes it doesn't, pulling the clutch in doesn't recognize, and it just will not let me drop it into gear. I don't know why it does that, but after like 20 seconds or so, it lets me do it. So I wonder if the computer is thinking about it and it doesn't really know that it's ready to go. I have no idea. I don't know if anybody else has had this problem, but I did. So that's me. As for the E-Clutch again, when you come to a stop and say you are in too high of a gear, you will notice that the screen actually has a small arrow that tells you to downshift. So the bike itself is pretty much dummy proof. If you've never ridden a bike before, this bike is pretty much going to tell you how to drive. I imagine if you get to a high enough uh, rev or high in the RPMs, it'll tell you to upshift depending on how high you are. I personally have not figured that out because I don't really redline it, especially in the break-in period. I did not want to try that, so I imagine it would tell you to go up, but it does tell you to go down. I will be kind of repeating that clip right here so you can kind of see on the screen that it's doing that. But that is what I do. That is basically what it does. Very simple. So pretty much, yeah, if you don't have any experience, you could ride this bike. Although I wouldn't recommend going straight to a 650, but it's not bad. As for the 650 portion, compared to other street bikes, it definitely does not have the off-the-line punch that you would expect from a bike like this. You kind of have to roll into it. I've noticed really around like the 8,000 RPMs, that's when the power band really starts to kick in, and you'll notice that the bike wants to take off a little bit better. So if you are coming from a stop sign or a stoplight and just punching it right off the bat, you probably will not beat other bikes. It is a Honda. They are reliable, but just know that you are not getting that punch right off the line. It's more of a rolling speed. If you're doing 60, yeah, you might be able to keep up with a couple other bikes straight off the line that way. But just keep that in mind. As for the lights on this thing, I have noticed from what I've heard from riding with friends that the rear tail light seems to be a little less noticeable. I will admit most bikes do not have a great rear tail light, so just be aware of that if you're riding alone at nighttime or even during the day. Some people may not see you, but always ride as if nobody sees you. That's just my opinion. Now for the headlights on this thing, the clip that I have does it no justice. I have ridden many bikes at nighttime, and I gotta admit, straight off of the factory floor, I can see the road with this bike at nighttime. Every other bike I've had, I always have to upgrade because I cannot see a thing at night. And so, trust me, you will not be upgrading the headlights on this thing. It is amazing. Now, of course, you might want to add a couple headlights while going into turns if you're running through the mountains or something like that at nighttime, because you can't see off to the side when you turn, so you have no idea what you're turning into if it's a sharp turn. But that is also kind of every bike's fault. It's the way it is when you ride. So definitely look into that if that's what you want to do. But as most people just kind of cruising on the road, you will not have any problems riding at nighttime. So just keep that in mind. Now, as for the full 300-mile break-in period, I will admit that the stock exhaust, I wish it was a little bit louder because really I hear more wind noise than I hear the bike. So sometimes if you're not paying attention, you may only realize that you need to shift up if you're not paying attention to the RPMs with the vibrations of the bike. So if you are a new rider, you may have to think a little bit about that. There is not really many options. I think the only thing out right now is the Akrapovic exhaust. So hopefully in the future we get a better affordable options maybe, because I mean that is $1,300 right now and most people don't have that to drop. I mean this bike did cost about $11,000 out of the box, so just keep that in mind as well. But otherwise, I think it is a great bike. Hopefully this kind of gives you some insight on how you think about it, if you want to get one or not. But I think it is a great bike, and hopefully this helps you guys with a decision if you like it or not. Thank you.